Hello, and welcome to Umbral Dread. Before we begin, take a moment to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I always enjoy reading them. If you enjoy slow, unsettling stories that quietly pull you deeper into the shadows, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Now, settle in, let your body relax into stillness, and allow the sounds of the outside world to slowly disappear into silence. Tonight, something waits within the darkness, patient, unseen. So close your eyes, listen carefully, and drift into the depths of Umbral Dread. Story 1. When this happened, I was around 10 or 11. I'm older now with my own life and my own responsibilities, but I still think about it more than I want to. I've told pieces of it before, usually late at night when people are sharing creepy stories and nobody wants to be the first one to admit they're scared. But this is the full version, and it's long because it needs to be. There are details that never left me. There are feelings that come back so fast it's like I'm right there again. We lived in tribal housing at the time, in a place called Rabbit Ridge in Keshena, Wisconsin. It wasn't some isolated cabin in the woods or anything dramatic like that. It was just home, a normal house where normal family stuff happened. My mom lived there with me and my brothers, the kind of place where the TV was always on, where shoes piled up near the door, where you could tell what someone ate just by the smell that hung around the kitchen. That night started out ordinary, too. My mom and my brothers were going to my grandma's for the evening. I don't remember the exact reason. Maybe they were visiting, maybe there was dinner, maybe my mom needed help with something. It wasn't presented like a big deal. They asked if I wanted to go with them, and I didn't. I wanted to stay home. At that age, staying home alone felt like being trusted with something important. It felt grown up, like I was getting a small piece of independence. I wasn't thinking about danger. I wasn't thinking about bad things. I was thinking about having the living room to myself and watching whatever I wanted without anyone changing the channel or messing with me. So they left and the house got quiet in that particular way houses do when the usual noise disappears. The air feels bigger. Every sound stands out. The refrigerator hum becomes noticeable. The little pops and clicks in the walls feel louder. But I wasn't nervous at first. I was comfortable. I was doing exactly what I asked for. I turned on the TV and put on American Dad. I remember that part clearly, because I can still picture the scene in my head, the colors of the show lighting up the room. I was sitting there like any kid would, half paying attention, just enjoying being left alone. Then I started hearing a tapping noise. At first, I didn't even react. I assumed it was something normal. Houses make sounds, pipes knock. Something shifts because of temperature. Maybe a branch was touching the side of the house. It was one of those sounds that can be ignored for a minute because your brain doesn't immediately label it as a threat. But it kept going. Tap, tap, tap. It went on for several minutes, maybe 5, long enough that it stopped blending into the background and started pushing itself into my attention. It wasn't random. It had a rhythm to it, like someone was doing it on purpose. And it didn't sound far away like it was outside. It sounded like it was in the room with me. I muted the TV a little and listened. I turned the volume down, then down again until it was low enough that I could focus on the sound. I remember the exact moment my stomach tightened, because I realized I couldn't tell where it was coming from. I stood up and slowly looked around the living room, trying to play it cool even though I was the only one there. I checked the windows with my eyes. I checked the corners of the room. I checked the hallway entrance. The sound didn't stop. It kept tapping like it didn't care that I was listening now. Then I figured it out. My mom had a drum set in the corner of the living room. It wasn't like we had band practice every night. It was just there, partly because she liked it, and partly because our house had the kind of vibe where there were always random things around. The drum set sat in the corner like furniture. I'd walked past it 1,000 times without thinking much about it. The tapping was coming from there. That should have been a relief, because at least it wasn't the windows or the door. But it didn't feel like relief. It felt weird, because drums don't tap themselves. I walked over to it, slow and careful. I told myself it had to be a mouse or something, a little animal trapped inside one of the drums. That explanation made sense enough that I could keep moving. It gave me something to do besides stand there feeling scared. I leaned in and looked closely. I got down so my eyes were level with one of the drums, trying to see if there was a hole or a tear, trying to see movement inside. The tapping happened again while I was right there, and I flinched. Not a big jump, but enough that I felt embarrassed, even though nobody was watching. Then I saw the top of one of the drums ripple. Just for a second, like something pushed from underneath and the drum head reacted. It wasn't a huge dent, but it was clear. A visible movement. A small wave in the surface exactly in time with the tapping sound. I stared at it. I didn't see anything inside. No fur, no shadow, nothing. It was just an empty-looking drum, except it was acting like something was in there. At that point, I started feeling scared, but it wasn't full panic yet. It was more like curiosity mixed with fear. Like the part of me that wanted to solve problems was still stronger than the part of me that wanted to run away. I kept thinking, what is that? How is it doing that? Is there a trick to it? Is something under the drum? Is the floor shifting? Is the drum set not stable? The tapping happened again, and I did something I still don't know how to explain. I think it was the fact that I was a kid, the fact that I was alone, the fact that the sound felt like it was inviting me into some kind of game, the fact that kids, when they're scared, sometimes try to turn the fear into something they can control. I raised my hand and tapped the drum myself. Not hard, just enough to make a sound back. Immediately, something hit it from the inside. It hit back, and the response was not delayed. It was right there, like it was waiting for me. Like it understood exactly what I was doing and was answering. My heart started beating harder. I stepped back half a step, then leaned in again because I couldn't stop myself. I hit the drum again, a little harder this time, like I was testing it. It hit back just as hard. Now it wasn't just tapping, it was reacting, matching me. I did it again. It answered again. At first, it almost felt stupidly exciting, like I'd discovered a secret, like I'd found some weird trick hidden inside an ordinary object. I know how that sounds, but that's what it felt like for a few seconds. Like maybe it was a prank by the universe. Something creepy, but also kind of fascinating. So I kept going. I hit the drum and it hit back. I did it again. It hit back. I did it maybe 5 more times. Each time it responded, the feeling in my chest changed. The curiosity started shrinking and the fear started growing. The back and forth was too perfect, too direct. There was no random animal behavior to it. It wasn't scratching, it wasn't bumping around. It was responding like it understood the game. And then, somewhere deep down, a thought formed that I didn't want to think. What if it isn't trapped? What if it's choosing to do this? My hands got sweaty. I remember that because I looked down at my fingers and they felt sticky, like my skin had changed. The living room didn't feel like my living room anymore. It felt like a stage where something was happening and I had accidentally become part of it. I wanted to stop, but I also wanted one more test. One more hit, just to prove something to myself, just to confirm that it really was responding. So I hit the drum again. Nothing. I waited. I stared at the drum head, watching for any ripple, any movement. Nothing. I hit it again, a little harder, trying to force an answer. Still nothing. The silence that followed felt worse than the tapping. It was like the room had held its breath. It was like I had gotten the attention of something, and then it decided it was done playing. And then it happened. From the back of the hallway, I heard something sprinting straight toward me. Not footsteps like a person walking, not the soft patter of an animal. Sprinting, fast, heavy, direct. Like whatever it was had been waiting at the far end of the house and had just decided to close the distance all at once. I didn't see anything. I didn't have time to look. My brain didn't give me options. It gave me one instinct. Make yourself small. Protect the parts that can't handle it. I dropped down and covered my head and plugged my ears. I curled in on myself like that could stop anything from reaching me. I squeezed my eyes shut so hard it hurt. I felt my shoulders rise up around my neck. I pressed my palms tight against my ears like if I couldn't hear it, it couldn't get all the way into me. The sprinting sound stopped, but I didn't hear it stop in a normal way. There wasn't a last step. It was more like it ended right next to me without the sound of slowing down. Like it went from far away to right there in a way that didn't follow the usual rules of distance. I stayed frozen. I don't know how long. Long enough that my muscles started to ache. When I finally uncovered my ears and lifted my head, the living room looked the same. The drum set was still there, the TV was still on, still playing, the characters still moving like nothing had happened. The air looked normal. But I felt it. I felt something watching me. Not the normal feeling of being scared in a dark room, where your mind convinces you there are eyes on you. This was different. It felt heavy and focused, like a real attention aimed directly at me. Like I had stepped into the path of something that noticed me and didn't want me to forget that it noticed me. I started sweating so badly it was unreal. I could feel individual droplets forming and moving. I felt them on my scalp. I felt them run down my back under my shirt. My stomach hurt. My mouth went dry. My breathing got shallow because every breath felt loud, like it might provoke something. I knew I couldn't stay there alone. I grabbed the phone and called my grandpa. I don't even remember exactly what I said. I just remember the panic in my voice, the way I tried to explain without having the words. I remember begging him to come get me. He came. Thank God he came. Once another person was in the house, something in me settled a little. The feeling of being watched didn't vanish instantly, but it faded enough that I could move again and get out of there. I left the house, and I didn't look back at that hallway. I didn't want to see anything standing there. I didn't want to give my eyes the chance to confirm what my body already believed. After that, life kept going because that's what life does. You grow up, you change schools, you move. You get older and you learn how to act normal even when something isn't normal inside you. And for a long time, I treated it like a single childhood nightmare that happened while I was awake. A glitch, a one-time event, something that didn't fit anywhere else. But I never forgot it. And then, almost 20 years later, something happened that dragged it back into the light. This was about 6 months ago. I was living my adult life not thinking about Rabbit Ridge on a daily basis when my uncle called me. His name is Aaron. He sounded wrong the moment I answered, shaken in a way I didn't associate with him. He wasn't calling to chat. He wasn't calling with regular family news. He told me he'd had a dream that messed him up. He said in the dream he was back at the old house in Rabbit Ridge at night. The way he said it made it clear the dream felt real to him, not like a fuzzy random thing. He said he could hear his mom, my grandma, screaming from inside the house. In the dream, he ran toward the sound and went in. He told me the house looked exactly the way it used to when we were kids. Same setup, same feeling. That detail bothered me because dreams usually blur places. They mix rooms up. They change the layout. But he said it was specific, like his mind had rebuilt it perfectly. In the dream, my grandma ran out of the house toward him, terrified. She told him there was something in the back room. He said he felt that dread you feel in a nightmare when you know you shouldn't go closer, but you can't stop yourself. Like the dream is pulling you by the collar. He stepped into the back room and saw a man sitting on the bed, turned slightly, looking back at him. And the man was smiling. Not a normal smile. Aaron said it was too big, inhumanly big. A grin stretched too far, like it didn't belong on a real face, like it was trying too hard to show teeth. Aaron asked him who he was. The man answered him like they were old friends, like Aaron was the one being rude for not remembering. "Don't you remember me?" the man said. Aaron told him no. "Who are you?" And then the man said something that made Aaron's heart drop. He told me Aaron actually used those words. My heart dropped, like the feeling was so sudden and heavy that it turned his whole body cold. The man said, "I'm the one who was messing with your nephew all those years ago on the drum set. When Aaron told me that, I got that same sick, hollow feeling I'd had as a kid, right after the sprinting sound. It was like time folded in on itself, like something reached across 2 decades and tapped me on the shoulder just to prove it still could." Aaron said in the dream he freaked out, and then the man jumped out the window. Just like that. Like gravity and common sense didn't apply. Like the whole scene was designed to deliver the message and then disappear before Aaron could do anything about it. After Aaron finished telling me, there was a long silence on the phone. I didn't know what to say because there wasn't anything that made sense. If he'd told me he dreamed about a stranger or a monster, I could have shrugged it off as a nightmare. But he didn't. He dreamed about the exact location, the exact setup, and the exact detail that I had never fully made peace with, the drum set. I don't know what to think, and I'm not going to pretend I have some perfect answer. I don't know if dreams can connect people, or if places leave marks on families, or if fear itself can be passed around like a story until it becomes real. I don't know if it was something attached to the house, something attached to the land, or something that noticed me that night and never fully let go. But I do believe those two things were connected. Aaron showed me a picture of what he said the man looked like. I don't have it here in front of me as I'm telling you this. But even hearing that he had an image in his mind, clear enough to draw or find a match, made it worse. Because it made it feel less like a random dream and more like an actual encounter, even if it happened in sleep. What really gets me is the timing. Almost 20 years had to pass. We grew up, we started our own families, we got busy with adult problems, and then, out of nowhere, it came back up, like someone reopened a door that had been locked for decades. That's the part that makes my skin crawl. Not just that something happened when I was a kid, but that it didn't stay in the past, that it waited, that it showed itself again in a different way, through someone else, using words that pointed directly back to me. Even now, writing this out, I can feel the memory in my body. I can remember the living room light from the TV. I can remember the drumhead rippling. I can remember the sprinting sound from the hallway and the way I covered my ears like that could protect me from something I couldn't even see. And I can remember the feeling afterward, most of all. That feeling that something was still there, watching. This memory still sends chills up my spine, and I don't think it ever won't. Story 2. I'm a twin. I always have been, and I always will be. People say it like it's a fun fact, like it means you always have someone to share clothes with or someone to blame when you get in trouble. For me, it has always meant something deeper than that. It's like being born with a second heartbeat in the room. Even when we weren't touching, even when we were in different places, I always felt like part of me was nearby. My sister's name is Sam. She's my best friend. We've been close for as long as I can remember, even through the phases where we fought like it was our job. When we were younger, we argued about everything. Who got the top bunk? Who took too long in the bathroom? Who borrowed a sweater and stretched it out? We would say the meanest things and then 5 minutes later be whispering and laughing under the covers again. That's what people don't understand about twins. It isn't just closeness like regular siblings. It's this constant awareness of the other person, like they're part of the same system as you. I think Sam knows me better than I know myself, and I know her in a way I can't really explain to anyone else. Most people can't tell us apart. They hear the word identical and decide it's impossible, so they don't even try. They make the same jokes over and over like they invented them. Mirror images? Do you ever switch places? Which one are you? They laugh like it's harmless. Even our parents have mixed us up sometimes when they're distracted. And that used to bother me, because to me, the differences have always been obvious. You just have to look long enough. You just have to care. Sam's jaw is slightly rounder than mine. My eyes are a bit more oval, and I've always had a small mole beneath my left ear. Sam doesn't. It's tiny, but it's there, and I've touched it 1,000 times without thinking. It's one of those little details you stop noticing until it becomes important. A few months ago, Sam disappeared. That sentence still feels fake in my mouth, like it should belong to someone else's story, not mine. One day, she was here. She was normal. She complained about homework, rolled her eyes at our dad's jokes, laughed at something on her phone, and shoved it in my face to show me. She went to bed like usual, and then the next day she was gone. Not ran away gone, not went for a walk and got lost gone, just gone. Her bed was empty. Her phone was there. Her shoes were there. There was no note, no message, nothing missing except her. My parents panicked the way you'd expect. I watched them become different people in the space of an hour. My mom turned into someone raw and shaking, like her skin didn't fit right anymore. My dad went cold at first, then furious, like anger could force reality back into place. The police came. Neighbors came. Everyone asked the same questions in 100 different ways, and I answered them until my throat felt scraped. They searched. They kept searching. Police officers, volunteers, people with dogs. They walked the nearby roads and trails. They checked the woods. They knocked on doors. They looked at security cameras from gas stations and shops. They put up posters that looked like they belonged in another town, another life. Sam's face smiling in a picture we'd taken at a birthday party, bright and alive under the word missing in bold letters. And then nothing happened, no clue, no body, no sign she'd been taken, no sign she'd left. It was like she'd been erased with a clean swipe. The world kept spinning anyway, which felt like an insult. People still went to work, still complained about traffic, still bought coffee. Meanwhile, my sister was gone, and every second that passed made it feel less and less like we'd ever get her back. After about a month, people started changing their tone. At first, it was urgency, calls, visits, offers to help. Then it became the same soft phrases over and over, like they were reading from a script. We're so sorry. We're thinking of you. Let us know if you need anything. I wanted to scream at them that I didn't need casseroles or sympathy. I needed my sister. One night, when I couldn't sleep, I lay in bed staring at my ceiling while the house settled around me. The night moved slowly into early morning, that gray time where everything feels unreal. I kept thinking I heard sounds that weren't there. A creak, a faint thump, the softest scrape like a foot shifting on carpet. I finally got up and slipped out of my room, careful not to wake my parents. But when I passed the stairs, I heard quiet weeping from downstairs. At least one of them was awake. I paused and held my breath, listening. The sound was small but constant, like someone trying not to make noise and failing. I kept going. Sam's door was closed. I stood there for a moment with my hand on the knob, suddenly nervous, like I was about to walk into a place I didn't belong anymore. It was stupid. She was my twin. Her room was part of my life. But everything had changed. I opened the door slowly and stepped inside. The room was exactly how she left it. Her clothes were still draped over the chair. Her books were stacked messily on her desk. The faint scent of her shampoo and perfume still lingered in the air, weaker than before, but present enough to hurt. It was like the room was holding its breath, too, waiting for her to come back and make it normal again. I sat on the edge of her bed and didn't touch anything else. I don't even know why I felt so careful. Like if I moved the wrong thing, I'd ruin some invisible pattern that might be important. For a few seconds, the silence felt almost peaceful, like the world had paused. Then my skin prickled. The sensation came suddenly, so strong it made my stomach tighten. The feeling of being watched, not the normal kind where you imagine eyes on you and then laugh at yourself. This was heavier. It felt physical, like a weight pressing on my shoulders. The hairs on my arms stood up. A cold line seemed to run down my spine like ice water. I told myself the room was empty. I looked around. No one was there. The closet door was closed. The window was shut. The corners were dark but ordinary. Still, the feeling didn't leave. It got worse the longer I stayed, like something was leaning closer. I couldn't stand it. I got up too fast, backed out of the room, and hurried to mine. I shut my door and leaned against it, breathing hard, annoyed at myself for panicking, but unable to shake that sense that something had noticed me. I slept eventually, but it wasn't real sleep. It was the kind where you drift and jerk awake and your heart is already racing. In the morning, I woke to my mother screaming. It wasn't a startled scream. It was the full-body kind, the kind that comes from somewhere deep and breaks through everything else. I heard my father's footsteps pounding up the stairs, fast and uneven. Doors opened. Voices rose. For a second, I thought something terrible had happened. Something worse than what we'd already been living through. Then I heard my mom sobbing, crying words I couldn't understand. My sister had returned 3 weeks, 6 days, and 18 hours after we last saw Sam. My mother did what she had done every morning since the disappearance. She went to stand in Sam's doorway. She called it a ritual, like it was a prayer she didn't want to admit was a prayer. She would stand there and look at the empty bed for a few seconds, like staring hard enough might make Sam appear. That morning, Sam was there, asleep in bed, covers pulled up, hair spread on the pillow, like she had never left. I ran to the doorway and just stood there. I couldn't move. My mind refused to accept the shape in the bed as real because if it was real, then what had the last month been? A mistake? A dream? My mom was crying and touching Sam's face with shaking hands. My dad was yelling, swearing, demanding answers like the room could provide them. Sam woke up confused and startled. She sat up, blinking at all of us like we were the weird ones. She had no memory of being gone. To her, it was like she had gone to bed that night and then woken up to chaos. She looked between our parents and me, her brow furrowed, asking what was wrong, why everyone was acting like that. The police came back, again. They asked questions. They checked Sam over. They asked where she'd been, who she'd been with, what she remembered. Sam could only tell them she didn't remember anything unusual. Doctors ran tests. Therapists talked to her. Psychologists asked careful questions in calm voices and watched her reactions. Everyone said the same thing in the end. Sam was healthy. There were no signs of injury, no signs of drugs, no signs of trauma that anyone could prove. Her missing memory was real, but unexplained. The police were as confused as we were. My parents, exhausted and desperate for relief, decided to accept it. Their missing daughter was home. That was what mattered. They wanted the nightmare to be over, and if pretending it made sense was the price, they were willing to pay it. At first, I was willing too. I hugged her. I cried into her shoulder. I listened to her voice and tried to let it settle the panic inside me. I wanted so badly to believe we'd been given a miracle, but the feeling that something was wrong didn't hit me all at once. It crept in slowly, like a crack spreading across glass. It started as a small discomfort I couldn't name, and then it grew into something I couldn't ignore. At first, I thought it was my own fear, that prickling on the back of my neck, the sense of being watched that had started in her room the night before she returned. I figured my brain was stuck in survival mode. I told myself I was traumatized, that it made sense to be jumpy. Then I started noticing Sam. She acted like Sam when people were looking. She smiled and laughed. She teased me. She rolled her eyes at our dad's overprotective questions and answered our mom patiently, even when she repeated herself. She knew the right expressions. She hit all the familiar notes. But when she thought no one was watching, her face would change. The smile would slide off like it had never been real. The little frown lines would smooth out. Her eyes would go blank, like she'd switched off. It was the emptiest look I've ever seen on a human face. Like there was nothing behind it, no thoughts, no emotion, no presence. Just a shell sitting there waiting for the next cue. The first time I saw it, I told myself I imagined it. The second time, I told myself she was just tired. The third time, I felt cold all over. It happened again and again. And every time, after a few seconds, she would seem to notice me, not hear me. Notice me, her head would tilt slightly and her eyes would sharpen, and then the life would snap back into her face. She'd smile easily and say something casual, like she'd been caught zoning out. She'd ask about school gossip. She'd bring up an inside joke from when we were little, like she was proving something. And that was the part that made it worse. Whatever had come back had Sam's memories. No matter what I asked, she knew the answer. She remembered how Sam broke her wrist 6 years ago, falling off the skateboard she swore she could ride without practice. She remembered our childhood dog's name, the mutt we loved so much that we cried for days when he died. She remembered secrets we'd whispered late at night, the kind of secrets you only tell someone who feels like the same person as you. She remembered the nights one of us would sneak into the other's room and squeeze into a too small single bed, knees knocking together under the blanket while we talked about stupid things and scary things until we fell asleep. I tried to catch her out. I invented a fake friend from middle school and asked if she remembered them. She frowned and corrected me instantly, like I'd made a mistake. I mentioned a made-up event, a party that never happened. She laughed and said I was mixing it up with something else, then added details that made the lie feel almost real, like she could build any story I offered into something believable. Every test I tried only proved she was paying attention, that she knew how to handle me. And then I noticed she wasn't eating. Sam was never a huge eater, but she used to love certain things. She'd steal fries off my plate. She'd beg for a second slice of pizza if she thought she could get away with it. She had a favorite cake she could never resist. Now she barely put food in her mouth at all. At dinner, she would cut everything into pieces and push it around her plate, moving it carefully so it looked like she was eating. She'd take tiny bites that seemed more like acting than hunger. She talked through meals, complimenting my dad's cooking, asking my mom questions, laughing at the right moments to keep attention off what she wasn't doing. Then she'd volunteer to clear the plates and wash up, cheerful and helpful, and she'd scrape most of her portion into the trash before anyone noticed. It made my stomach twist, not because I thought she was sick in a normal way, but because it felt intentional, like eating was something she was supposed to do to fit in, but didn't actually want. I decided to force the issue. I bought Sam's favorite cake and brought it home like a surprise, setting it on the counter where my parents could see it. I made a big deal out of it and insisted Sam have the first slice. I handed it to her with what I hoped looked like an innocent smile, like I was being a sweet sister. She thanked me, polite and warm, and refused. She said she was too full. I pushed. I reminded her she had never turned down this cake before, not once. For a split second, her face flashed with something sharp and ugly. Fury so intense it didn't fit her expression, like a mask slipping. Her eyes, usually warm brown, looked like they darkened all at once, like the pupils swallowed the color. I blinked, and the moment was gone. She was smiling again, softer now, as if I'd imagined it. But I hadn't. She took the slice. She lifted the fork. I watched her hands, how controlled her movements were. I saw a flicker of disgust cross her face right as she took the first bite, like she'd put something rotten in her mouth. Her throat worked as she swallowed. Her smile strained as she said it was good. Then, as soon as she could escape politely, she went to the bathroom. I followed. I stood outside the door and listened. I could hear retching. Not delicate, not quiet. Violent, like her body was rejecting the food. I also heard angry muttering under her breath, low and harsh. I couldn't make out words clearly, but the tone didn't sound like Sam at all. It sounded like someone furious at a problem they didn't expect to have. After that, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured that flash of rage, those darkened eyes. I kept thinking about the night in her room and the feeling of being watched, the way I'd bolted like something was right behind me. Yesterday, something finally clicked into place. I was looking at Sam's face, really looking, the way I used to when we were little. And we'd stand in front of the mirror comparing features to see what made us different. And I realized her jaw looked slightly sharper than before. Her eyes looked less round. She looked more like me. The thought hit me so hard I felt sick. That evening, I walked down the hall and stopped outside her door. It was slightly ajar. The light inside was on, soft and warm. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself it was normal to study your twin's face after something traumatic. I told myself a month away could change someone. Weight loss could change someone. Stress could change someone. Still, I pushed the door open just enough to see inside. Sam was sitting at her dressing table facing the mirror. She was moving her hair over her shoulder slowly, like she was practicing, like she was rehearsing how to look. The room was quiet except for the small sounds of her movement. And there, beneath her left ear, I saw it, a small mole. My mole. My heart seemed to stop. My mouth went dry. I felt heat rush to my face and then leave me cold. My eyes lifted to the mirror because I don't know what else I expected to do. Maybe I thought I would see Sam's familiar reflection and convince myself I was wrong. Maybe I thought it would all snap back into something that made sense. Instead, I saw what was sitting in my sister's room, wearing my sister's body. In the mirror, the face was ours, but wrong in a way that made my brain struggle to process it. The shape was right, the features arranged correctly, but everything about it felt corrupted, like someone had built a copy from memory without understanding what makes a human face alive. Its eyes were sunken, the iris and pupil blended together into one flat, inky black, like holes punched through reality. The whites of its eyes looked dry and sick, with a horizontal yellow-brown band running through them like old stains. Its skin was a pale gray-white blotched with dark patches that looked like bruises under thin tissue. The lips were pulled back slightly, stretched tight enough that its teeth showed even when it wasn't smiling. The teeth looked too exposed, too present, as if the mouth didn't know how to rest. I stood frozen in the doorway. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. Terror numbed me so completely it felt like my body didn't belong to me. My hands tingled. My legs felt locked. My mind kept trying to find a normal explanation, and failing. Its gaze slid toward me in the mirror. I waited for it to turn its head. I waited for it to stand up and rush at me. In my mind, I saw long yellow nails, shaped into sharp claws, tearing into me like paper. I waited for violence because that would have made sense. That would have matched the fear. It didn't move. It smiled. Very slowly. The lips in the mirror looked thin and bluish, stretched in a way that felt obscene, pulled over gums that looked wrong too, full of little holes and dents, like something had been eating them from the inside. The smile wasn't friendly. It wasn't even pretending. It was like it knew exactly what I was seeing and wanted me to understand that I was alone with it now. Then it made a sound. The best way I can describe it is a hum. But it wasn't a normal hum. It was thin and grating, a noise that made me think of nails dragging across a chalkboard or the sharp scrape of a fork on a ceramic plate. It went straight through me. My stomach turned. My eyes watered. I broke. I turned and ran back to my room as fast as I could without screaming. I slammed the door and leaned against it, shaking. I listened for footsteps behind me, for the handle to turn, for that hum to come closer. It didn't follow. That was almost worse, because it meant it didn't need to chase me. It meant it wasn't worried. I spent the rest of the night searching online. I went through websites and blogs and forums that talk about demons and possessions, about spirits that take over a body, about creatures that imitate people. I looked up changelings and doppelgangers and every story I could find about something returning as someone you love. None of it fit perfectly. Or maybe it fit too well in pieces, like a puzzle made from different boxes. Now I'm here because I don't know what else to do. I need answers, or at least I need to know if anyone has heard of something like this before. My sister was missing for a month, and something came back in her place. It knows her memories. It knows our history. It can act like her when it wants to, but when it thinks no one is watching, it goes empty. And in the mirror, I saw what it really is. I haven't confronted it. I can't. Not yet. Not when it's walking around my house wearing Sam's face. wearing my face too, like it's trying on my identity. Not when my parents are so desperate to believe everything is fine that they would probably call me cruel for even suggesting the truth. So I'm staying quiet. I'm watching. I'm pretending. And I'm trying not to be alone with it again, because I don't think it came back to give Sam her life back. I think it came back because it wants mine. Story 3. I'm not writing this so anyone will pity me. I'm not looking for sympathy, and I'm not asking to be told I somehow earned what happened, like it was fate or karma balancing some invisible scale. I'm writing this because I need people to understand how fast a life can fall apart when you're built the way I am. How one moment can start a chain reaction you can't stop, even when you can see it coming. Cause and effect. A single spark, then the whole hillside gives way. It started 5 years ago. Nora and I had been married 16 years. We weren't some perfect couple, but we'd lasted. We'd been through hard times and good times, and if I'm honest, she carried more weight than I ever admitted. I was difficult. I was stubborn. I could be careless. I took her for granted like she was part of the furniture, like she'd always be there no matter what kind of mood I brought into the house. I used to think Nora would never leave. Not because she didn't have reasons, but because I honestly believed she wouldn't even know how to live without me. That's how arrogant I was. That's how blind. After the kids were born, everything got less predictable. The pressure was constant. Sleep was a joke. Every bill felt like a threat. Every small disagreement could turn into something bigger. The house was always loud, always messy, always alive. And instead of stepping up, I got worse in the ways that matter. I got short-tempered. I got selfish. I looked for quiet in all the wrong places. We had 3 kids. Jack was our oldest. He was 14 when everything fell apart. Smart kid, good heart, already old enough to see through me. Luna was 8, bright and sensitive, the kind of kid who watches your face to figure out what mood you're in before she speaks. Samantha was a year and a half. Still a baby, still at that age where you don't understand anything, but you feel everything. That night was the night everything went to hell. I'd stopped at a bar on the way home. One drink turned into more than one, like it always did when I was trying to quiet something inside myself. I came through the door already irritated, already looking for an excuse to be angry. Nora snapped at me. Just a few words, probably not even that harsh, but it was enough. She didn't usually yell. Nora had a way of keeping herself under control, even when she was upset. But that night she raised her voice, and something in me broke loose. It felt like a gate opening. All the frustration, the shame, the tension I refused to deal with came rushing out. I lost it. I slapped her. I'm not going to soften that. I'm not going to explain it like it was complicated. There's no excuse. I did it. I hit my wife. If you're reading this and you're thinking you hate me, I get it. I hate me too. Nora didn't freeze. She didn't beg. She didn't stay and argue. She packed up right then, in the middle of the night. No dramatic speech, no second chances. She grabbed what she could. She got the kids. And she left. I remember yelling after her. I remember being so full of anger I didn't even understand what I was watching. It's one of the sickest truths about the kind of person I was then. I could be watching my life end and still be too proud to shut up. God, if I could go back, if I could reach through time and grab myself by the throat and tell myself to stop, if I hadn't been such a stupid, drunken idiot. According to the police report, Nora lost control of the car. She drifted into the oncoming lane, and she hit a truck head-on. Nora didn't survive. Jack didn't survive. Luna was alive, but barely. Samantha was rushed to the hospital, too. And me? I was at home, drunk and raging, not even knowing what happened until it was already done. Until I got the call. Until the words sank into me like nails. After that, I fell hard. I won't list every ugly detail because you can probably imagine them. I turned into a walking wound. I regretted everything I'd ever done. Every harsh word, every careless moment, every time I made Nora's life harder, every time I acted like I was the victim when I was the problem. Luna survived, but her spine was so badly damaged she'll never walk again. The doctors said it plainly, like they'd said it 1,000 times before, but hearing it felt like someone dropping a stone into my chest. Samantha, by some miracle, was the only one who escaped without serious injury. A baby in a car seat who came out with bruises and fear and confusion, but not broken the way the rest of us were broken. And me, I kept drinking. I drank every day. Morning to night, I drank to disappear. I drank because being awake felt like punishment. I drank because the world still existed and I didn't think I deserved to exist in it. People will tell you all kinds of things about grief, but there's a special kind of grief that comes with guilt. The kind where you don't just miss someone. You feel like you personally shoved them off a cliff. No matter what anyone said to me, no matter how many times someone tried to tell me the crash wasn't my fault, I knew what I'd done. I had lit the match. I had watched the fire spread. I had been the reason she got in that car in the first place. So when the state took Luna and Samantha away from me, I raged about it like an animal. I screamed about rights and family and fairness. But my brain was rotting in alcohol by then. I couldn't see straight. I couldn't think straight. I was dangerous, if not with my hands, then with my presence. I was the kind of person who makes a room feel unsafe. Now, looking back, I understand they were better off. Nora's sister took them in. A stable home, people who cared about each other, people who could help Luna live in a world that had suddenly become stairs and doorframes and limits, people who could raise Samantha without the constant shadow of the man who broke her family, and I was left alone, except for Snail. Snail was our dog, a Weimaraner. He was 2 years old back then, still young, still full of energy, still trusting. The kids had named him together. That name always made me smile even when I didn't deserve to smile. Snail. Like something small and harmless. Like something you'd never think could become the last thread tying you to a life you destroyed. Snail stayed with me through those years. When everyone else disappeared, when the house felt like a tomb, he was there. He'd press against my leg. He'd follow me from room to room. He'd stare at me with that steady dog look like he couldn't understand why I was falling apart, but he refused to leave me in it. But even he couldn't stop me from sliding down the cliff I'd built for myself. One night I overdosed on pills. I did it on purpose. I wanted to go to sleep and not wake up. I remember thinking the only real justice would have been if I'd taken Nora's place in that car. If the wrong person had died, it was me. I survived. I woke up anyway. I still don't understand why. I still don't know what kind of world lets Nora and Jack die, and then lets me crawl back to consciousness. I remember lying in a hospital bed later, staring at the ceiling, and feeling like even death had rejected me. They kept me in the hospital a long time after that. Therapy, rehab, group sessions where people sat in circles and told the truth in front of strangers because the truth was heavier than secrecy. I hated it at first. I fought it. I wanted to stay numb. But somehow, even with all the damage I'd done to myself, I climbed up a little. Not enough to call it recovery, but enough to function. Enough to stop drinking. Enough to wake up and not immediately reach for a bottle. When I finally got out, I tried to do something that felt impossible. I tried to see my girls. It took 2, maybe 3 years before I could even force myself to look them in the eyes. That's the truth. I was ashamed. I was scared. I was convinced I would only poison them by being near them. But I also needed to see them with my own eyes, to know they were real and alive. Luna was 12 by then. She looked older than she should have, the kind of older that comes from pain. She didn't speak to me, not one word. She didn't even turn her head in my direction. She stared through me like I was air. Samantha was still little, but she didn't know who I was. She looked at me with curiosity like I was some stranger on a bus. Not fear, not anger, just blank distance. And that broke something in me all over again, because it was proof that time doesn't stop just because you want it to. People keep growing. Memories fade. Kids forget the faces of the people who weren't there. I didn't blame them. I couldn't. I didn't have any right to be angry. I was the reason their lives had been shattered. So I stopped visiting, not because I didn't love them, but because seeing me hurt them and seeing them hurt made me want to crawl out of my own skin. I knew I couldn't give them what they needed. I knew showing up and forcing myself into their world was just another selfish act dressed up like repentance. And just like that, I was alone again. That was the one thing I managed to hold on to. But sobriety leaves you with time. It leaves you with thoughts, and I needed something to do with my hands and my mind, something that wasn't a bottle or a pill. That's when I turned to hunting. It wasn't new to me. When my dad was still alive, he took me out into the woods all the time. He taught me how to read tracks, how to move quietly, how to handle a rifle safely. Those were some of the only calm memories I had from my childhood. I still had his rifle, too, my inheritance. The one thing of his that felt like it carried real weight. For a full year, I went out into the nearby woods almost every single day. At first, it was just walking, breathing in cold air, listening to birds, letting the quiet press down on me until my thoughts slowed. Over time, it became routine. It became the closest thing I had to peace. Out there, away from people, I finally had space to think about what I'd done without having to perform. I didn't have to act okay. The trees didn't care. The wind didn't judge. The woods just existed, and somehow that helped. Snail always came with me. He wasn't trained as a hunting dog, but he learned when to stay quiet. He learned when to stop. He learned that the woods were serious for me, that this was the place where I went to keep myself from falling apart. He'd move beside me like he belonged there, his gray coat blending into the brush so well sometimes I'd lose him for a second, and then see him again, watching me like he was making sure I was still following. In time, he became my closest friend, the only soul that stayed beside me through the worst years. And maybe that's why I'm writing this at all. Maybe because Snail wasn't just a dog to me. He carried a small piece of the family I once had, the part that was still innocent. That Friday started like any other day. I was sitting against a fallen tree with my rifle in my lap, watching a young buck through the scope. It was far, maybe 600 feet, maybe a little more. A clean distance. The deer was calm, unaware. Snail was tucked into the brush nearby, perfectly still. I remember thinking how strange it was that he understood the moment like he knew we were supposed to be quiet. I lined up the shot. I aimed where my dad had taught me to aim, the spot that would make it quick and clean. My finger rested on the trigger. One tiny movement and it would have been over. But I didn't pull it. In that full year of going out there, I hadn't killed anything. Not a single animal. I carried the rifle like it was part of my body, but I never fired it at a living creature. I'd had deer in my sights, boar, foxes, plenty of chances. But every time, something inside me refused. Call it conscience, call it guilt, call it whatever you want. I just couldn't bring more harm into the world. Not after what I'd already done. The buck lifted its head like it sensed something, then bolted away. I lowered the rifle. Calm. Normal. Almost relieved. Watching it run free did something to me. It loosened a knot in my chest. Like I'd made one choice in my life that didn't end with blood. Snail burst out of the brush, shaking with excitement, tail wagging hard like he was proud of me, like he understood I'd let it go. I scratched the top of his head and felt the dampness in his fur from the ground. Good boy, Snail, I told him. Come on, let's keep moving. I took a step forward and Snail froze. His head snapped up fast. Ears shifting, his whole body going stiff in a way I'd never seen before. Not playful alertness, not interest. This was something else. Confusion mixed with caution like his instincts had just run into something they didn't recognize. "What is it, buddy?" I asked. Then I heard it too. A voice, far away, deep in the woods. Someone crying, someone screaming for help. For a second, my mind tried to give me safe explanations. An animal, a fox making a scream that sounds human, something weird you hear in forests sometimes. But the sound sharpened. It became clearer. It had words in it, even if I couldn't make them out right away. Panic, desperation. It was a woman. Someone was out there, and they were in real trouble. "Go, Snail! Find it!" I urged. And he took off. He ran like he'd been trained for it his whole life, weaving through the trees with confidence, taking the easiest paths without slowing down. I followed, crashing through brush, branches slapping my arms, my boots, slipping on roots. I gripped the rifle tight, terrified I'd drop it because even though I didn't use it to hunt, it still made me feel less helpless. The cries got louder. They weren't animal-like. They weren't a trick of the wind. They were raw and human, full of fear, like someone on the edge of breaking. Then the trees opened into a small clearing, and for a second I truly thought I was hallucinating. A woman was kneeling in the grass. She was wearing nothing but a white bathrobe. The sight hit me like a punch because for half a heartbeat my brain tried to turn her into Nora. Grief does that. It grabs any shape it can. But I knew immediately it couldn't be Nora. Nora was dead. Nora was gone. That fact was carved into every day of my life. Still, the memory slammed into me so hard I went weak. My vision narrowed. The world seemed to pause. This woman wasn't Nora. Nora had been tall, with long, straight, dark brown hair. This woman had short black hair. Her face was buried in her hands as she sobbed, shoulders shaking. "Ma'am, are you okay?" I called out, forcing my voice steady. "Help me, please," she said, without lifting her head. "I'll help you," I replied. "What happened? Are you hurt? Do you need me to call an ambulance?" She didn't answer the questions. She just kept crying deep, hopeless sobs that sounded like they came from someplace beyond pain. I stepped closer, keeping the rifle in my hands, not pointed at her, just held. Like holding it made me remember I could still do something if things went wrong. Snail didn't move with me. He stood at the edge of the clearing, stiff as a statue. His head was low, his body tense, like his instincts were screaming at him not to go any closer. It wasn't like him. He was usually curious, friendly, the kind of dog who'd run to someone crying. But now he looked confused, almost frightened. "What happened?" I asked again. "Should I call an ambulance?" "Help me," she said again, same broken tone, like her mouth was only capable of those two words. That's when I noticed something I hadn't noticed at first. A ring of stones around her, a perfect circle of small rocks arranged deliberately in the grass, too neat to be random, like somebody had placed them one by one. My stomach tightened. I had walked these woods for years. I knew the paths, the slopes, the quiet little landmarks that helped you know where you were. I had never seen this clearing, never seen this circle. "Ma'am, what happened?" I said, and when I got close enough, I reached out and put a hand on her shoulder. The moment my skin touched her, my stomach dropped. It wasn't like touching a person, it wasn't soft. It was hard, wrong, not cold exactly, not warm either. Just wrong, like touching something that had been left out too long. Something that had the shape of flesh, but not the feel. My hand jerked back on instinct. Snail exploded into barking like he'd lost his mind. A deep, furious bark that turned into a growl. I stared at him, stunned. Why was he barking at her? Then the woman lifted her head. Or she lifted what should have been her head. She didn't have a face, no eyes, no nose, no mouth. Not even a twisted face. Just a wet, bloody mess where her features should have been, like someone had smashed them in and kept going until there was nothing left to recognize. I screamed. It tore out of me without permission. I fell backward into the dirt so hard it knocked the breath out of my lungs. Her robe slipped off her body, and her body started to change. Her skin stretched upward, her torso lengthening in a way no human body can. Her arms twisted and cracked, bending backward at impossible angles. The sound wasn't just bone cracking. It was like wood snapping under pressure. The arms split open, more limb-like stumps pushed out from her sides, writhing, searching, like they were being forced into existence. Her skin darkened as it changed texture, turning into segmented plates, like armor, shiny and wet. Something like chitin. Something insect-like and wrong on a scale that made my mind recoil from it. She shrieked, but it wasn't a human scream. It was like metal scraping against bone, like a harsh, grinding sound that made my teeth hurt. And then, she wasn't a woman at all. She was a long, centipede-shaped horror, maybe 4 meters long, thick-bodied, glistening, plated, alive in a way that felt unnatural, too big, too heavy, too real. And then the light vanished. It was like someone flipped a switch on the world. The sun blinked out, the air shifted, the clearing turned dim, and the sky above us turned a deep, violent red, like the world had been wounded and was bleeding into the clouds. Under that red glow, everything looked wrong. The trees, the grass, my hands, Snail's coat. It was like being dropped into a version of the woods that had the same shapes but none of the same safety. Snail leapt in front of me. He planted himself between me and the creature, barking and snarling, body rigid with terror and defiance. He looked almost unreal under that red light, like a ghost refusing to step aside. The creature shrieked again and writhed its long body, whipping like a tree in a storm. The armored plates caught the red glow and shimmered. I couldn't move. My legs felt locked. Then it struck. Its huge mandibles slammed into the ground where Snail had been a second earlier. The impact shook the earth. Dirt jumped. I felt the vibration go up through my bones. And one thought hit me with perfect clarity. If I don't act now, I'm going to lose the last thing I have left. Something in me finally snapped into motion. Instinct took over. I shoved Snail as hard as I could, sending him tumbling away across the dirt. The creature's jaws tore into the soil where he'd been. "Run!" I screamed. "Go, Snail, run!" I raised the rifle and aimed at the monster. It lifted the front of its body like a cobra, rising high, looking down at us. I could feel it watching, not with eyes I could see, but with attention, with focus. Like it knew exactly what I was. My hands shook, but I fired anyway. The gunshot cracked through that red forest and echoed like it had nowhere to go. The bullet hit. I heard it hit, a sharp metallic clink against the creature's armor. And it didn't react. No flinch, no stagger, no blood, nothing. My blood went cold. That sound told me everything. The rifle was useless. There was only one option left. I grabbed Snail by the collar and yanked him forward, giving him a last push. He barked, like he didn't want to leave me, like he was trying to fight for me, but then he turned and bolted toward the trees. I ran after him as fast as I could. We crashed into the woods under that blood-red sky. Snail's gray coat blended into the red shadows so quickly that within seconds I lost sight of him. "Snail," I shouted, "where are you?" But it felt like screaming into a void. The forest swallowed sound. The pines looked warped under that light, like their edges didn't line up with reality. The world had the same layout, but none of the same rules. I stopped for half a second, gasping for air, trying to listen. No barking. Nothing but my breathing and a distant pulsing roar that seemed to come from the red sky itself, like thunder that never finished. "Snail," I screamed again, voice breaking. A loud crack of splintering wood snapped me out of it. Something huge was coming. It plowed through the trees like a bulldozer. Branches snapped. Underbrush tore apart. I could hear hundreds of legs clicking over the forest floor like a hailstorm of hard shells. I ran again. I didn't even know which direction I was going. I just ran deeper. Anywhere. Clutching my father's rifle like it was a lifeline, even though I'd just seen it do nothing. And that's when I realized it was raining. The rain looked black under the red sky. Thick sheets of it pouring down, freezing cold, soaking me in seconds. It stung my eyes and ran down my face. My clothes clung to my skin. My hands got slippery on the rifle. I stumbled, kept moving, glanced behind me every few steps, terrified I'd see it right there. It was always there. Not close enough to grab me yet, but close enough that the sound never went away. "Snail!" I gasped, barely able to breathe. I leaned against a pine tree for a moment, drenched, shaking, trying to get control of my lungs. My heart hammered so hard it felt like it could break my ribs. Where the hell am I? What is this? I forced myself to look around, to find some landmark, some familiar bend in the trail, something that would tell me this was still my world. And that's when I saw something worse than the monster. Between the trees were figures, dark silhouettes, perfectly still, not moving, not coming closer, just watching. They weren't shaped clearly enough to describe as men or women. They were just tall, human-like forms made out of shadow. And the worst part was the feeling they gave me. Like they knew me. Like they knew every cruel thing I'd ever done and every selfish thought I'd ever had. Like they were there to judge. When I tried to focus on them, they slipped behind trees as if they didn't want to be looked at directly. But they didn't leave. I could still feel them present, surrounding me, witnessing. My body trembled so hard my teeth clicked. "Snail!" I screamed, using the last of my voice. The bushes rustled behind me. I spun around, raising the rifle, refusing to let go. And then I heard it. A bark. A familiar bark that cut through the red rain like a rope thrown to a drowning man. A soaked gray shape burst through the foliage. Snail. In the red glow, he looked ghost-like, but he was real. Seeing him hit me so hard with relief, I almost collapsed. I dropped down and grabbed him, hugging him tighter than I ever had, burying my face against his wet fur. He was trembling, too. Not just from cold, from fear. His eyes were wide and confused, like he couldn't recognize a single smell or sound. "Come on, Snail," I whispered, stroking him. "We have to move before that thing finds us." I looked back through the trees. The shadow figures were gone. For a second, I wanted to believe Snail had scared them away, like he had some simple power I didn't understand. I wanted to believe the world still had rules where a good dog could drive off something evil. I slung the rifle over my shoulder and started moving again. Fast, but trying not to crash blindly through the woods. Snail stayed close at my side, tight against my leg. The forest felt endless, a red maze with no exit. We reached a slope and I slowed, trying to make my way down carefully because the ground was slick with mud and rain. That's when I felt it. Even through my boots, the ground trembled, hundreds of legs striking the earth in rhythm. I snapped my head back just in time to see a pine tree rip straight out of the soil and topple over as something shoved through it. The creature was coming. "Run," I shouted. "Snail, go." But this time it wasn't just chasing. It was furious. It was there in a blink, close enough that the sound became physical. The tree beside me exploded into splinters as the mandibles slammed into it. Chips of wood flew like shrapnel. I stumbled, fighting to stay upright on the slope. And then I heard Snail again, his barking wild and desperate. "Snail, where are you?" I shouted, scrambling. He was close. I saw him. My dog, my brave idiot, was attacking the monster, throwing himself at its legs, snapping and biting like he didn't understand what he was up against or didn't care. He was all heart and loyalty and fear. "No, no, no, no," I screamed. "Snail, come here, run." But he latched on. He clamped his jaws onto one of the creature's limbs and shook his head violently, trying to tear it the way a dog tears a toy, like he could actually hurt it. I couldn't leave him. I spun around, yanked the rifle off my shoulder, and aimed again. The black rain poured harder, stinging my eyes, running down my cheeks like oil. My hand slipped, but I locked my grip and forced the sight onto the creature's head. I fired. This time, the shot felt different. I don't know how to explain it. Maybe luck. Maybe angle. Maybe something about the creature moving. But I heard the crack as the bullet smashed into its churning mandibles, and the sound wasn't a harmless clink this time. It screamed, a high metallic shriek that made my ears ring, and the front of its body lifted high and thrashed. For one insane second, I thought I'd done it. I thought I'd actually heard it. I thought we might live. Then the hillside gave way. The rain had turned the soil into a slick mess. The creature's huge weight shifted, and the ground collapsed under it like wet sand. The monster tumbled down the slope, smashing through trees as it fell, ripping branches apart, crashing lower and lower until it disappeared into the forest below. The sound faded. It was gone. And then the relief vanished because I realized something immediately. The last time I saw a snail, he was still attached to it. Where is he? I ran down the slope as fast as I could, slipping and half falling, grabbing at branches to keep from sliding. I followed the trail of destruction, the snapped trees, the crushed brush, anything that showed where it had gone. But the more I ran, the less sense the distance made. It felt like the slope stretched out forever, like the forest was rearranging itself to keep me from reaching the bottom. I fell face first into the mud hard enough to taste dirt. I didn't stop. I crawled. I dragged myself forward, grabbing roots, rocks, anything, like an animal trying to pull itself out of a pit. "Snail!" I screamed, my throat tearing up. No answer. The rain hammered down harder. The red sky pulsed deeper, like a living wound overhead. I forced myself upright, mud dripping off my face. Something flickered between the trees below, a shape I couldn't identify. "Snail," I yelled again. I tried to whistle loud as I could. Nothing. I lunged forward again, but the rifle was dragging me down. It felt suddenly heavy, useless, like a dead weight from a different life. I threw it into the mud without caring where it landed. My father's rifle, my inheritance, gone in a splash of filth because none of that mattered compared to my dog. I kept going, grabbing branches, trying to keep my footing, but my boots slid out on the soaked earth and I slammed down again, my body hitting like a rag doll. As my face hit the mud, I heard it, a single bark. Sharp, familiar. Snail. It had to be snail. I scrambled up, and the world changed. The sky was blue, bright and clear like nothing had ever happened. The trees stood tall and normal. The forest smelled like a normal forest. The red glow was gone. The black rain was gone. The air felt like my world again. And I was on my knees in the mud, soaked and shaking, gasping like I'd been underwater. My head pounded, my heart hammered, my hands shook so badly I could barely clench them. "Snail!" I screamed again, voice cracking. But there was nothing. No creature, no broken red sky, no shadow figures, no ring of stones. Just the woods I'd been walking for years, with ordinary light and ordinary sounds. I searched until I couldn't walk straight. I didn't just search for an hour and give up. I stayed out there for days. Days. I came back with water, with food, with flashlights. I walked patterns like a search party. I looked for tracks. I looked for torn fur. I looked for blood. I listened until my ears rang. There was nothing, no trace of what I'd seen, no sign that the clearing had ever existed, no sign of a huge creature moving through the woods, like the whole nightmare had never been real. But Snail was gone, and so was my father's rifle, both of them left behind in that other place, whatever it was. That red place. Snail was the last intact piece of my old life, the little dog my girls had named, the only living thing that stayed with me when I didn't deserve it. And now he was gone without leaving so much as a hair behind. But I don't believe he's dead. I know how that sounds, but I can feel it in my gut, like a pressure that won't go away, like a sense that something is unfinished. Snail is alive somewhere, trapped in that red world, trapped in whatever rules that place has. Still running, still fighting, still waiting. When I finally went home, I didn't collapse into bed. I didn't try to pretend I could move on. I gathered everything I had left. Supplies, maps, batteries, food that can last. Anything that might help me survive if that place opens again and doesn't let me leave so easily. That afternoon, I bought a new rifle. Not because I suddenly want to kill, not because I think I'm a hero, but because I'm not walking back in there helpless. I'm going back. I don't know how long it'll take. I don't know if the woods will open the same way twice. I don't know if I'll even find the clearing again or if it will find me when it wants to. But if anyone reads this, I need you to understand something. I'm out there in the forest. I'm searching as long as my legs will carry me. I'm bringing my dog home, even if I have to walk straight into hell to do it. I won't let him be lost, too. Story 4. It's been almost 82 years, and I'm running out of road. I've got real health problems now. Nothing dramatic or romantic about it, just the slow, stubborn breakdown that comes for everyone if they live long enough. I'm not looking for pity. I'm not even looking for anyone to believe me, not really. I just need to finally say it in full, in one place, before I'm gone. I told a few buddies after it happened, and I told my wife when I got home. But they all thought I'd lost my mind. The other GIs said it was blood loss talking. My wife begged me not to talk about it again, not to invite trouble, not to make myself look crazy. So I learned to keep it locked up. But memories don't stay locked. The smell comes back. The sound comes back. Sometimes it's so strong I feel like I'm not in my house anymore. I'm not an old man in a quiet room. I'm back on the water, sick with fear, hearing the world split open. That morning, dusky waves kept slamming into the sides of the Higgins boat and spraying us. The motion made me nauseous. We were packed so tight in there that you could feel other men's breathing on your neck, could feel their shaking through their gear. Wind-whipped soldiers stood bunched together, and over all of it we heard the noise of artillery. Huge, constant, far-reaching blasts that made it feel like the whole Earth's surface was being ripped apart by metal. I was a mess, I'll tell you that straight. No shame in it. Most of us were anxious, even the ones who acted tough. Your mind goes to strange places when you know you're about to step into something you might not step out of. I remember weird thoughts racing through my head, almost like my brain was trying to prepare itself. What would it feel like if my body got torn by shrapnel? What would it feel like to be shot, to burn, to be reduced to something unrecognizable? It wasn't bravery. It was my mind chewing on terror because it didn't know what else to do with it. The seagulls were out, restless and loud, circling like they already knew what kind of day it was going to be. I remember the smell of smoke mixed with salt and that ocean stink. Dimethyl sulfide, though I didn't know the word for it back then. Just that rotten, sharp sea smell that sticks in your nose. And then the sky started dropping white splats on us. Gull droppings, falling in wet streaks, landing on helmets and shoulders, streaking down our packs like the world itself was disrespecting us. The coxswain was yelling over the noise. 4 minutes. That number should have been small, but it felt enormous. 4 minutes until the ramp dropped. 4 minutes until we were meat on the sand. The stench of vomit was everywhere. Some of the guys couldn't hold it down, not with the waves and the fear and the exhaust. It seeped into everything. Clothes, hands, straps. Seawater ran down my cheeks as I pressed my stained helmet against my hair and tried not to throw up too. My throat kept doing that ugly little twitch. Bile kept rising and sliding back down. Some soldiers were praying out loud, "Protect my brothers." One man coughed. Another voice trembled, barely above a whisper. "Lord, watch over my body, frail and deficient." Their words got swallowed by the artillery shriek. Every time a blast hit the sand ahead, the sound rolled across the water and slapped our little boat like a hand. It felt like the air was punching us. I listened in silence. That was me. Eugene Misner. The guys called me Melons, a nickname that never made me proud, but I'd learned to live with it. I was part of Company E, 2nd Battalion, 8th Infantry. 30 of us jammed in that boat, all headed toward a beach codenamed Utah, about to meet real German soldiers in real fighting. I didn't want to go to war. I didn't want to kill anybody. That doesn't mean I was a coward. I wasn't yellow, at least I didn't think I was. I wasn't afraid of Germans as people. But I didn't want to die that day either. That part I was sure about. I wanted to fight for my country. I wanted the war to end. I wanted the Nazis beaten back into nothing. I just didn't want to pay for it with my life. Before we shipped out, my grandpa had looked at me in that quiet way older men sometimes have, like they see right through your face to whatever you're hiding. "We're all gonna die at some point, Eugene," he told me. "So you might as well give those Kraut bastards hell before they turn this world to ash." "I'll give 'em hell, sir," I said, and I meant it. I just didn't know what hell would look like yet. Like most of us, I enlisted after Pearl Harbor. I didn't get drafted. I volunteered. Back then it felt like the only right thing to do. But standing there on that Higgins boat, rocking toward the shore, I wasn't thinking about speeches or flags. I was thinking about whether my hands would shake so badly I couldn't load a clip. I was thinking about whether I'd freeze when the first man fell. For a brief moment, there was a lull in the shelling. The air felt too open without the constant explosions, like you suddenly notice your own breathing in a quiet room. In that lull, I thought I heard something else, guttural, low. Not artillery, not gulls. It wasn't human either, not in any way that made sense. I tried to listen harder, but the sound faded like it had never been there. The seagulls kept calling. Voices kept praying. It was summer of 1944, and the whole war was shifting. Hitler's choice to invade the Soviet Union had been a disaster. The Germans had won early and then started losing ground. Now they were stretched thin, fighting on multiple fronts, retreating and bleeding out. Operation Overlord was supposed to be the punch that broke them. Land in France, free Western Europe, push toward Berlin. Even with all the planning, we had setbacks. Weather like I'd never seen for June. Heavy rain, low clouds, rough seas. They postponed the invasion from June 5th to June 6th. And the delay drove everyone crazy. That extra night on the USS Bayfield felt like torture. Men tossed and stared at ceilings and tried to sleep and couldn't. During a briefing, an officer told us, "Expect 30% casualties." He talked about how fortitude had tricked Rommel, how German defenses were stretched, how they didn't know exactly where we'd hit, but they knew we were coming. That's what made it worse. They were waiting. On the Higgins boat, Artie Keyes elbowed me in the shoulder. "Hey, Melons." Artie's nickname was Sinatra because he could sing in a way that made the guys quiet down. Back home in Grafton, he'd been the star quarterback. Fit, strong, the kind of guy you assume will survive anything. But in that boat, his face looked tight, and I could see fear behind his eyes. And then I heard it again, that distant, distorted wailing carried by wind and rain, so far away you couldn't tell where it came from. It sounded like something huge and hurt calling out from beyond the world. The coxswain, his name was George, was the only English soldier in our boat. He swore hard while he fought the wheel. "Bloody hell, he's going the wrong way." He was talking about the landing control craft ahead of us. The LCCs were supposed to guide all of us to the right place. George yelled that 3 of the 4 had been destroyed by mines, and only LCC-60 was left. And according to him, that boat was taking us south, off course. Captain Lees, our commander, stayed calm. That man had a steady voice you could hang on to. "Follow the remaining LCC," he told George. "Just follow that boat. We don't care where it goes." Mist came over the sides and soaked my face. The Higgins dipped and tilted through the waves, 36 feet long, 11 feet wide, bouncing like it was barely a boat at all, powered by a loud engine pushing us toward the shore at about 12 knots. Everything in it rattled. Everything in it felt temporary. Artie leaned close and spoke into my ear. "The heck is happening out there? I can't see a damn thing." Soldiers were lifting up on their toes, trying to get a look past one another, trying to spot the sand. "Maybe they didn't want us to see," I said, and I didn't even know why I said it. It just came out. "Didn't want us to see?" Artie repeated, like the words made him colder. I tried to listen for that strange wailing again, but it was gone. While we waited, some men started dumping cartons of cigarettes into the water to lighten their packs. I didn't smoke. Grandpa smoked his whole life until cancer got him, and he swore up and down that fasting and God healed him. Whether that was true or not, he made me promise I'd never touch a cigarette. 2 minutes, George yelled. Overhead, aircraft roared, thousands of sorties pounding the coast. B-26 Marauders, B-17s, A-20 Havocs. It was so much firepower that it didn't feel real. It felt like the sky belonged to us completely. Behind us, battleships and cruisers and destroyers fired in deadly rhythm, and the blasts were so heavy they seemed to shove the Higgins forward. I could actually see shells streaking overhead and slam into German positions. It was terrifying and beautiful at the same time, like watching a storm you know is meant to kill people. Then the bombardment stopped, and the sudden quiet felt worse than the noise. "Get ready," George yelled. "When that ramp goes down, you boys get out." Artie's voice shook. "Melons, are we going to be okay?" I could see panic in his eyes, and it made my own fear sharpen. He grabbed himself and winced. "Goddamn coffee and spam. I'm gonna piss myself." "What's new?" I snapped back, trying to make it normal. 60 seconds. Then it happened. A scream of wood and metal, the whole boat lurched forward so hard it shoved us into each other. If we hadn't been packed tight, men would have fallen over. The Higgins had hit a sandbar. George tried to reverse. The boat wouldn't come loose. He tried forward again, and the engine sputtered like it was choking. "We're sitting ducks," someone yelled. Captain Lees barked orders. "Staley, get the ramp down." The engineer went to the winch, but it jammed. The ramp stuck. "I can't," the engineer croaked. "It's jammed." "Forget it," Captain Lees snapped. "We're going over." Men locked hands along the sides of the boat, making footholds so others could climb up and over the walls. Artie got out that way. When it was my turn, the men helping me teased me about my weight. My fingers slipped on the rim. I couldn't get leverage. Captain Lees came up behind me and shoved. I went over head first into the sea. That moment still sits in my body. Pure panic. Cold water swallowing sound. My brain stuttering as my feet kicked down, searching for the bottom. Only there was nothing. I expected shallow water. Instead, it was deep and freezing, and I felt the weight of my gear dragging me. Grandpa's voice rang in my head again, like he was right there with me. "We're all gonna die at some point, Eugene." I yanked the cord on my flotation vest and fought back to the surface, choking and spitting, and somehow Company E managed to swim away from the stranded boat and wash up toward the coast. And then, strangely, it wasn't as chaotic on the beach as we'd expected. There was still danger, still noise, still that constant sense that death could choose you at any second, but the beach wasn't the full slaughter we'd pictured. We ran across open sand toward the seawall. Behind us, the big guns were quieter now, only firing sometimes at targets inland. We took cover behind anti-tank obstacles, those metal structures the Germans put on the beach. I remember touching one and smelling filth and rust on it. "This ain't bad," Artie said, almost amazed. "We're lucky," our radio operator muttered, listening to his set. "Those boys at Omaha are in trouble." Captain Lees kept us moving. Down, down, when planes came in low. We saw small arms fire from behind the seawall, pistol shots, pointless against aircraft. And we wondered why the Germans weren't using their big 88S. Something was off. We sprinted toward the seawall, and I caught sight of a pillbox built into it, muzzle flashes flickering from within. The bullets hissed into sand around us, but didn't find many targets. I hate admitting it, but I remember feeling relieved. The enemy fire felt sloppy, like the people inside weren't trained for this. "They can't even aim," Artie said, and laughed too loudly. I coughed up seawater and looked north, trying to orient myself. "Something's not right, Art. I don't think we're in the right place." He squinted, and even he seemed to agree. The tide had pushed us off course. Captain Lees told us we were about 1,000 meters south of where we were supposed to land. He didn't seem upset. In fact, he sounded almost pleased. Kraut defenses are weaker here, he said. We can still get to the causeway. While the Seabees worked with explosives and more landing craft arrived, Sherman tanks rolled up the beach toward us. When those tanks showed up, it felt like the world got heavier in a good way. Like we weren't just men with rifles anymore. Like we had teeth. That's when I heard the strange noise again. That awful wailing far off, like something calling across distance and time. I asked Artie if he heard it. He didn't answer. Maybe he didn't want to. Captain Lees assembled us and told us we'd clear the bunker and move inland along the causeway toward Popeville. He ordered a couple men to sterilize the pillbox with grenades, but as they moved up, frantic shouting came from inside. It wasn't German. Joe Langford, who knew Russian, listened and went pale. He told Captain Lees the voices were Russian prisoners. POWs they wanted to surrender. They said the Germans had run away. They also said something else. Joe struggled to translate it, like he didn't want to say it out loud. They're saying the Germans took something, he finally said. Something important. Brought it here? And she's awake now. Captain Lees frowned. Who is she? Captain Lees brushed it off. Said they were probably out of their minds after getting bombed. But I remember how scared those prisoners looked, even after surrendering. They weren't scared of us. They were scared of something else, like surrendering was the only way to get away from it. We moved inland behind the tanks. The causeway was rough, lined by tall hedgerows, and the countryside had flooded sections where the Germans tried to slow us down. Sunlight came and went behind cloud cover. The air warmed slightly, but everything still smelled like wet earth and smoke. Captain Lees kept warning us about mines, S-mines, bouncing Bettys, the kind that jump up and explode at waist height and tear you apart. He described them in disgusting detail, and it shut everyone up fast. Every eye dropped to the road, the grass, the edges. We passed a crashed American glider. A Waco, it was crumpled and burning, and I remember thinking that whatever was inside had been turned to pulp. Some men crossed themselves. We kept moving. As we got closer to Popeville, we heard distant gunfire and mortar blasts. And then, in a pasture beside the causeway, I recognized the same field where I had seen that tan German Jeep veer off earlier. In the middle of the field sat an old hay barn, 2 levels falling apart, painted white but so weathered it looked like bone. The windows were splintered, impossible to see through. It looked like it had been standing too long, waiting to collapse. The German Jeep was gone. We reached a small stone bridge just outside town. Moss wrapped around it. A stream ran under, heading toward the sea. The lead Sherman tank stopped at the bridge. Captain Kearney, the tank commander, popped out of the hatch. He had a neat black mustache and looked confident, like nothing could touch him inside all that steel. He lifted binoculars and scanned the town. He barely had time to speak before I heard a dull, wet clunk. Then the binoculars exploded into blood. Captain Kearney's jaw tore open like someone had ripped it sideways. Bone and teeth and red spray. He slumped in the turret, head nearly separated from his neck. "Sniper!" someone screamed. We hit the ground, panic took over. A second round pinged against the tank hull. "It's coming from the barn." We opened up with rifles. The sound was deafening, non-stop. Bullets chewed the barn from top to bottom. One of the Shermans fired a shell, and the side of the structure blew outward, filling the field with smoke and flame. Captain Lees shouted for a few of us to move on it. Me, Artie, and Joe were closest. We got up and ran toward the burning barn, because that's what you did. You didn't have time to think. Your body just obeyed. As we closed in, we saw movement, a figure scrambling into the doorway. "German!" I yelled. Joe fired first, then me and Artie. We fired and fired, dirt kicking up, shots pinging, but the figure vanished into the black inside. We approached. ready to clear the building, and then, right under us, something jumped. A dented metal disc rose up between our feet and hung at Joe's waistline for a heartbeat, spinning in slow motion like the world had decided to show us the last thing we'd ever see. Captain Lee's earlier warning screamed in my head. Then the mine detonated. The blast tore Joe in half. I saw it clearly, his body opened like cloth ripping. Blood and organs dumped onto wildflowers like it meant nothing. The shock wave knocked Artie and me down. There was a brief silence, an unnatural pause, and then both of us started screaming. My legs were shredded, hot fragments buried themselves in my hips. Metal flecks burned into skin. The lower half of my body went wet with warmth. Blood. So much blood that my brain couldn't count it. Joe was in two pieces. Artie rolled on the ground, eyes wide, confused like he couldn't understand why his body wasn't working. He made a wet gurgling sound. Red bubbled from his mouth. A long slice of shrapnel, 6 inches maybe, was stuck in his throat. "Art," I tried to say, "we're okay." I lied to him because I didn't know what else to do. We weren't okay. I knew that as surely as I knew my own name. Then someone stepped out of the barn. A giant in a German uniform. Huge shoulders, coarse red beard, like an animal dressed as a man. Even through the pain, I recognized him as the driver I'd seen in the Jeep earlier. He fired a pistol into Joe's skull, even though Joe was already dead. Then he grabbed Artie and me by our ankles and dragged us across the ground like sacks. I begged for help, but the battle noise swallowed everything. He hauled us into the barn and slammed something shut behind us as bullets thudded into the walls. Inside, it was orange with firelight. Hay was scattered everywhere. Rafters above were collapsing. The air was thick with smoke and heat. I remember thinking, even in my shock, that the whole place was going to come down in minutes. Artie was slumped against the door. Blood poured over his collar. He'd pulled the shrapnel from his neck, and now his carotid was open. Bright red pumped out in hard pulses and sprayed the floor. He looked at me, and I knew he understood. Terror in his eyes. He couldn't speak, just gagging and wheezing, trying to breathe around what was happening to him. I tried to reach him. A boot swung out and crushed my hand. I heard bones crack. The pain was sharp enough to cut through everything. I yelped and fell back, clutching my ruined hand. A German voice hissed something at me. The words didn't matter. The hatred did. The man who kicked me was blonde, hair combed to the side, but filthy and sweaty now. His eyes were pale, strange, like metal with rust in it. His face was young in a way that didn't match the cruelty in him. He stared at us like we were food. Another soldier stepped into view. Older, weathered, handsome in a crooked way, features slightly off-center, salt and pepper hair, skin lined like he'd lived hard years. Then the red-bearded giant moved behind them, blocking part of the firelight. They were arguing. I didn't speak German, but you don't need language to recognize a fight. The blonde one was frantic, making choking noises, scratching at his own cheeks like he couldn't stand being inside his own skin. The older one snapped at him, stern, controlling. The giant grunted now and then like he was there to enforce whatever decision got made. I tried not to watch them. I tried to focus on Artie, but Artie was slipping away right in front of me. That's when I noticed the box. In the corner of the barn, half in shadow, sat the same long box I'd seen chained in the back of the German Jeep. Up close, it wasn't just a box. It was a coffin, heavy and ornate, made of iron and bronze. The kind of thing you'd expect in a museum or a church crypt, not in a French hay barn. Thick chains were wrapped around the middle like it was dangerous cargo. And it was shaking, not from the explosions outside, not from the floor vibrating. It was shaking on its own small movements at first, like something inside was testing it. Then another shell hit the barn. Blinding light tore through the side. The impact snapped Artie's head back and killed him instantly. His body went limp in a way I'll never forget. The Germans were thrown backward too, slammed into the rear like rag dolls. The coffin tipped. The chains shifted. In my wrecked, fading state, I heard that animal wail again. Closer now, not distant, not on the wind. This time it filled the barn. The blond soldier sat up screaming, holding his hand. He was missing fingers now, torn off by shrapnel. The older German clutched his knee. The giant, somehow still moving like nothing had happened, raced to a heavy sliding door at the far end and threw it open. I saw daylight and the tan Jeep outside. The older soldier shouted at the blonde one. The blonde ignored him and limped toward me with his pistol out, face twisted with rage and panic. He crouched close, snapping his fingers in my face, trying to force my attention. I was fading fast, vision tunneling, sound drifting. He tapped my nose with his ruined hand, then shoved the pistol into my mouth. The barrel scraped my lips, pressed over my tongue, jammed deep enough to gag me. My jaw spasmed. I couldn't breathe. The metal tasted like blood and oil. His hand shook. He muttered to himself like he was trying to convince himself to do it. The barrel chipped my teeth. I bit down hard, just to make it stop, just to have one small act that belonged to me. The blond soldier jerked back and started talking louder, pointing at his own eyes with the stumps of his fingers, demanding that I look, demanding that I see. I was too weak to fight, too weak to understand. Then, in the middle of that moment, the coffin burst apart. It didn't open like a lid lifting. It exploded into pieces like something inside had decided the metal didn't matter. Chains snapped loose with a sound like gunfire. Dust and smoke rolled outward. The Germans recoiled, and the wailing, that was the worst sound I have ever heard. Not a scream, not an animal cry, not anything that belongs in nature. It was grief and rage and hunger, all in one sound, and it filled every corner of the barn and my skull with it. It made my ears hurt. It made my vision blur. The pistol vanished from my mouth as the blond soldier stumbled back. All three Germans aimed their weapons at the dust, terrified. Out of the smoke stepped a woman. She stood where the coffin had been, tall and slender, with dark brown hair falling over pale skin that looked almost luminous in the firelight. She wore a white garment that draped over her shoulders and body like an old-fashioned dress. She held herself with a slight hunch, and in her hands was a long metal scythe, a scythe like the one my grandpa used in the fields back home. Seeing it there, seeing something so familiar in a place so impossible, made my mind slip sideways, like reality tore a seam. I tried to speak, "What? What?" But she screamed again, and the sound hit me like pressure. I clapped my hands over my ears, shaking. I realized with a sick certainty that this was the same wailing I'd heard from the Higgins boat out on the water, far away. It had been calling across the whole invasion, across the beach, across the causeway, and now it was here, in the barn, and it was awake. The Germans fired. The blonde emptied his pistol. The others unloaded submachine guns. Bullets tore through her body. I saw flesh break, saw blood, saw holes open, only for the wounds to close as fast as they appeared, stitching themselves shut like the body didn't accept damage. The Germans paused to reload. The woman lifted the scythe in one smooth motion, one clean, graceful swing. She took all three of their heads off at once. One stroke. 3 men. Their heads hit the ground with dull thuds. Their bodies collapsed in a neat line like they were arranged. I couldn't make sense of it. My mind kept trying to turn it into something human and failing. I whispered, "Please don't hurt me." She turned to me and the wailing stopped. The sudden quiet felt unreal. She moved toward me and lifted me from the burning hay like I weighed nothing. She held me in her arms, and my face was close to hers. Her skin looked like porcelain. Her eyes were a piercing blue that didn't just look at you but through you, like it could see everything you'd ever been and everything you might become. And the strangest part is this. I wasn't scared of her. I thought I was dying. I thought I was about to join Artie and Joe, and I focused on my prayers. I thought of my wife back home and begged God to let her forgive me for leaving too soon. Begged that she'd be proud, begged that she'd go on living. The woman's lips moved. She spoke in a language I couldn't recognize, something old and vibrating, like sound with weight. As she spoke, a powerful sensation built inside me like my blood was humming. She held me tighter and began to turn. She started to twirl with me in her arms. We danced in the middle of the burning barn while bullets shattered wood and the roof groaned. She was strong, unnaturally strong, and my legs lifted from the ground as she spun. The firelight streaked into circles. Smoke wrapped around us. The world narrowed down to her face and that motion and the feeling of being carried. "What's happening?" I tried to ask, but my voice barely existed. She smiled at me as we turned and turned and turned. It wasn't like any smile I'd ever seen. I don't have better words for it. It felt like the shape of the universe was hidden in that expression, like she knew something about life and death that humans aren't supposed to know. And as my vision darkened, I felt a calm settle over me, deep and final, like a hand smoothing my hair. I understood, without understanding how, that she had decided I would live. When I woke up next, I was in a hospital. It took 6 months, but they saved my legs. I still limp. I've limped every day since. I never made it back to the war. I wanted to. I prayed for strength to keep fighting, to avenge Artie and Joe and the rest of my guys who gave everything. But it wasn't my path. I was discharged and sent home. I miss them every day. Artie, Joe. The faces that stayed young in my mind while I kept aging. I still wonder what I could have done differently, even though the truth is there probably wasn't anything. When I tried to tell people what happened, the doctors, my friends, my wife, they looked at me the way you look at someone who's been broken, like it was kinder to agree with the simple explanation. Shock, trauma, blood loss, hallucination. They weren't cruel. They just couldn't hold a story like that in their hands. My wife especially didn't want it spoken out loud, like naming it would bring it back. Life moved on the way it always does. The war ended. We had kids. Time rolled forward. Now I'm a grandpa myself, and I tell the young ones what my grandpa told me. Don't smoke. Fight for what's good. Don't waste your life. The everyday things became louder than one impossible day in France. But now my end is close, and the silence isn't holding anymore. In the dead of night, when the house is dark and everyone else is asleep, I see that coffin bursting apart in the burning barn. I hear that wail. I see her standing there in white, holding a scythe like it belongs to her, like she's carried it forever. I tremble, not just from fear, though there's fear in it, but from the weight of what I saw, the maiden who saved me. I don't know what she was. I don't know why she was chained in a coffin and hauled across a battlefield. I don't know why she chose me and not my friends. I only know that she was real, and that I've been living on borrowed time ever since, whether anyone believes it or not. Story 5. I frowned when I saw the bathroom sink. A murky pool of still water sat in the basin like it belonged there, thick and dull, not reflecting anything the way clean water should. I'd taken full advantage of my day off by sleeping most of the morning away, and my wife had already left for work hours earlier. The house was quiet in that comfortable weekday way, the kind of quiet that makes you think you've got all the time in the world. A sticky note was stuck to the mirror above the sink. "Sorry, babe, the sink has somehow gotten itself clogged again. Will you please fix it? Love, you." Next to the message, she'd drawn a round little cat with huge watery eyes. Above it was a tiny speech bubble that said, "Please," like the drawing itself was begging me. I actually laughed. Somehow got clogged, huh? I thought, shaking my head. The culprit was right there on the counter, lined up like a display in a store. Makeup containers, little jars of creams, tubes of moisturizer, and some special combo cream that promised to do 3 different things at once. My wife swore she needed every single one of them to look presentable. I never argued too hard about it because, honestly, I thought she was beautiful no matter what was on her face. but I did know one thing for sure. The sink hated all of it. That stuff went down the drain every day mixed with soap and water, and it clung to the inside of the pipes like glue. It grabbed every long strand of hair that washed down with it, and sooner or later it turned into a nasty plug that made the sink back up. Since she never wanted to deal with the cleanup, it always fell on me. I teased her about it constantly. I called it her girl slime. I grabbed a rag from under the sink, wrapped it around my hand, and leaned over the basin. The water was cloudy gray, like dishwater that had been sitting too long. I stuck my hand in anyway, feeling around until my fingers found the drain plug. I gripped the top edge and rolled my wrapped fingers around it, trying to break up the top layer of the clog without having to touch too much of it directly. When I pulled my hand back out, I saw what the rag had collected. A clump of black-green goo clung to the cloth like wet moss. I grimaced and rinsed the rag off, watching the sink water creep downward through the tiny opening I'd made. It drained at a painfully slow pace, like the sink was swallowing through a clogged throat. I decided to wash my hands in the kitchen instead because the bathroom sink looked like it had turned into a swamp. I poured myself a cup of coffee while I was there, trying not to think too hard about what I'd just pulled out. When I came back, the water level had dropped to just a shallow layer. The basin was finally visible. It looked worse than I expected. The whole sink was coated in a dark, slimy film. The drain itself looked like it was wearing a nasty cap, a layer of green-black grime clinging to it, thick enough that it almost had texture like something growing. It reminded me of algae on a rock, except this was in my house. I stared at it and actually felt annoyed with myself. How did I not notice it had gotten this bad, I thought. It wasn't like we hadn't had this problem before. I opened the cabinet under the sink and pulled out the cheap plastic drain snake, a long, flexible stick with a little hook at the end. I didn't want to touch any more of the sludge than I had to, so I lowered the snake toward the drain carefully and fed it in. I started working it back and forth, twisting and flexing the rod, shaking it side to side. I could feel resistance deep in the pipe, something thick and stubborn. I pulled gently at first. It didn't budge. I tugged harder. The snake caught on something that held tight, like it was fighting me. For a few seconds, it felt like a stupid little tug of war between me and whatever disgusting mess was sitting in there. Then it broke free. The regret hit instantly. A wet wad of hair and slime shot out of the drain like it had been launched. It sprayed soupy chunks of filth across the mirror and splattered my shirt and arms and, worst of all, my face. A few globs even hit my lips. I froze for half a second in pure shock, then stumbled back. The smell hit a beat later. It was rancid in a way I wasn't prepared for. This stuff was usually gross, sure, but it was mostly just ugly. It had never smelled like anything more than old soap. This was different. This was rot. The odor filled the bathroom like a cloud. It smelled like a wet dog rolling in something dead, like a rotten field mouse that had been left in the sun and then soaked in dirty water. My stomach lurched. I gagged hard, coughing and trying to keep my coffee down as my eyes watered. And then another sensation arrived, and that's the moment fear crawled up my spine. Everywhere the slime had landed, my arms, my cheeks, my forehead, my skin started burning. It wasn't just irritation. It felt like a chemical burn, like something biting into me. I wiped at myself fast, smearing some of it away, but the burning didn't stop. If anything, it got sharper, more focused, as if whatever was on my skin was reacting to being touched. My breathing got shallow. Panic mixed with nausea. The air in the bathroom felt hot and thick, like there wasn't enough oxygen in it anymore. The room tilted slightly, then swung wider, and suddenly it felt like I was standing on a boat. I tried to step toward the door. My knees buckled instead. I managed to get one knee down in time to keep from slamming my head on the tile, but the world still went dark around the edges. The last thing I remember was the mirror blurred with slime and my own reflection half visible behind it, mouth open like I was trying to shout, but no sound would come out. Then nothing. When I came to, I was on the bathroom floor. My cheek was pressed against cold tile. For a second, I didn't know where I was. That horrible smell snapped me back into reality right away. It poured into my nose with the first breath, thick and rotten, and my stomach clenched again. I pushed myself up slowly, using the counter for support. My skin still felt tender, but the burning had faded into a dull sting. What the hell? I muttered out loud. I honestly thought maybe I'd hit my head. Maybe I'd passed out from the smell and the shock, and now I was dizzy and imagining things. Then I looked at the sink. The wad of hair and goo was bigger. Not like it spread out a little, bigger. It had grown, filling the entire basin, swelling up as if it had been feeding while I was unconscious. It wasn't sitting there like trash anymore. It looked like a living infection. Lumpy, wet, thick. Green and black bulges rose and fell across its surface in slow pulses, like small lungs breathing under a skin made of slime. I stood there, swaying slightly, one hand gripping the counter, trying to convince myself that I was still groggy and seeing things. Then the side of my hand brushed a few loose strands of hair on the edge of the sink. Something changed instantly, like a switch flipping. The mass reacted, hairs parted, slime flowed. The whole thing lunged. I jerked backward, but it was too fast. A thick strand of hair uncoiled from the main pile and snapped around my neck like a rope. In the same second, the rest of the thing slapped onto my face with a wet, heavy sound. It covered my nose and mouth. I couldn't breathe. Pins and needles shot through my hands as I grabbed at it. The surface was hot and wet, and it moved under my fingers, writhing in tiny ripples like worms packed together. It clung to my skin with horrible strength, and the smell was even worse up close, like the rot was inside my mouth now. My mind blanked. There was no thinking, no plan, just pure instinct. Get it off, get it off, get it off. I dug my fingers into it and pulled. The slime squelched as it shifted in my grip. The hair wasn't dead hair anymore. It moved, it twisted. Hundreds of tiny strands started wriggling like snakes. It reminded me of Medusa in the worst possible way. Hair that wasn't hair, alive and angry. I blinked hard as strands tickled my eyelids and tried to push under them. My vision blurred when they made contact. I felt my throat tighten as the tendril around my neck squeezed harder. I could feel my air running out, that dry panic rising as my body begged for oxygen. I wasn't going to die here. Not like this. Not because of some disgusting thing that crawled out of a drain. I jerked with everything I had, twisting my shoulders and pulling at the hair rope. It loosened just enough that I could suck in a breath. That was a mistake. The moment my mouth opened, the long clump dove in. It shoved itself into my mouth like it had been waiting for that second. I felt it scrape the back of my throat. It slid over my tongue and hit my uvula hard enough to make me gag. Then it pushed deeper, down my throat, forcing itself into my esophagus like a living cord. I choked and gagged, eyes watering. The slime coating had dripped down my throat. The taste was beyond disgusting. If hell had a flavor, this was it. Chemical rot mixed with sour bacteria, like spoiled medicine and decay at the same time. My stomach rolled. I couldn't even vomit properly because the hair was blocking everything wedged inside me. I clawed at it, trying to pull it back out, but it was slick and it kept sliding deeper every time I gagged. My throat convulsed, desperate to reject it, and the thing used that movement like leverage. My eyes scanned the counter wildly. I needed something sharp, something that could cut it. I held the hair with one hand, trying to keep it from going any farther, and slapped my other hand across the countertop, knocking over bottles and knocking into jars. Plastic clicked and rolled. Then my fingers hit something solid, my electric razor. I grabbed it so hard I almost dropped it, turned it on, and the buzzing sound felt like hope. I jammed it toward my mouth and hacked at the hair strand, sawing at it with shaking hands. The razor caught it, the strand snapped, the mass on my face shuddered, and I swear it made a sound Not a normal sound, not loud, but like a silent scream you can somehow still feel. The part still in my mouth writhed like a worm cut in half. It thrashed against my tongue and down my throat, trying to hold on. I didn't know what else to do. So I swallowed. My eyes burned with tears as the last of it slid down. The sensation was so violating I wanted to crawl out of my body. But the movement stopped. The writhing faded into nothing, leaving my throat raw and my stomach turning. I ripped the rest of the slime off my face and threw it back into the sink. It splattered and tried to gather itself again. I watched in horror as little leg-like shapes pushed out of the main body, as if it was about to climb out, skittering like a giant insect made of hair and grease. Not this time. I reached under the sink cabinet with shaking hands and grabbed the bottle of drain cleaner, the heavy-duty stuff. I flipped the cap and poured without measuring, drenching the entire mass. It reacted immediately. The slime shriveled as the chemical hit it. The black and green bulges collapsed. The surface bubbled and melted, the whole thing breaking down into steaming, dissolving filth. The smell changed from rot to harsh chemical burn, but I didn't care. I stood there breathing through my mouth and watched with grim satisfaction as it died. When most of it had liquefied into something that looked more like normal drain sludge, I forced myself to put on rubber gloves. My hands were still shaking. I scooped what was left, clumps of hair, bits of thickened goo, into a dustpan like I was cleaning up after a crime scene. I carried it outside to the front porch. My hands felt numb, but my mind was sharp in a way it hadn't been all day. I needed to make sure it was gone. Not washed away, not hidden in a trash bag. Gone. I grabbed a can of hairspray and a lighter. The flame flicked on. I pressed down on the nozzle and the aerosol shot out and ignited in a bright stream. Fire rolled over the hair clump, catching instantly, curling it into black, smoking pieces. The smell was awful in a new way now, burned hair and chemical, but I didn't stop. While it burned, I swear I heard a squeal. Not a normal sound, not like an animal and not like anything I could easily describe. But it made my stomach twist because it sounded like pain. I stood there until the last of it was ash. Then I went back inside. The bathroom looked like a disaster zone. Slime on the mirror. Slime on the counter. Slime in places I didn't want to think about. I cleaned everything obsessively, scrubbing until my arms hurt, wiping down the mirror until it shone again. After that, I stood in the shower and let hot water pour over me until the water turned cold, as if the heat could wash the memory off my skin. When I finally crawled into bed, my whole body felt wrecked, like I'd been in a fight, like my muscles didn't belong to me anymore. The mattress felt cool and perfect, and for the first time since I'd woken up, I thought maybe I could rest. But even as I closed my eyes, one thought kept creeping in. I was not looking forward to what that swallowed hair was going to do to my stomach later. Still, exhaustion won. I drifted off. Later that evening, I woke up to a kiss on the cheek. My wife was home. She smelled like outside air and her shampoo. Normal things. Safe things. She smiled at me like nothing in the world had ever been wrong. "Wow," she said, walking into the bathroom and peeking at the sink. "The sink's so clean now, hope it wasn't too much trouble." It was. "It was no problem," I said, and forced a weak smile back. I wanted to tell her. I wanted to show her the burn marks on my skin, the way my throat still felt scratched. I wanted to say something like, "You have no idea what came out of that drain." But how do you say that out loud without sounding insane? So I kept it to myself and tried to act normal. We ate dinner, we watched TV. She talked about her day. I nodded and answered at the right times, even though part of my mind kept replaying the moment the sink lunged at me, the way the hair moved like it was alive. Everything felt almost okay, until a few minutes ago. I was in the kitchen getting a snack when I heard her call me from the bathroom, voice casual like she was asking for a towel. "Oh, ew, honey," she said. You missed a spot. I walked in, and she pointed at the corner of the mirror. There was a tiny fleck of green there, so small it could have been a smear of leftover gunk that my cleaning missed. But I stared at it and felt my stomach tighten like a fist. "Could you get that?" she asked. I stood there for a second too long, not answering because my mind was doing the math all over again. One fleck becomes a film. A film becomes a clog. A clog becomes a living thing that learns what you are and how you breathe. I swallowed, and my throat still felt raw. I told her I'd take care of it, but I already know I'm not sleeping in our bed tonight. I think I'm going to sleep on the couch.